Well, this sure isn't the video that I wanted to make today. Son of a bitch. So let's go back to where I said we still gotta make that one more piece, and that piece I can guarantee you is gonna be the coolest one of the bunch, and it's also gonna be our first time printing water-based. Well, that turned out to be a massive flopping failure. Been like a week and it still stings. So let's tell the story about what happened. This thing was plagued and destined to fail right out of the gate. I just didn't know it yet. So problem number one. Now, it's hard to call this a problem because it's not a problem. It's actually amazing and I'm super excited about it, but just for this project in particular, yes, it was an issue. Right now, the shop is growing at a rate that's just mind-boggling to me. It's so amazing. It seems like I'm taking on multiple new clients a day and talking with other people who are potential clients on a regular basis, inquiring about jobs, and it's just, there's so much going on right now. I am so fucking grateful for that. You have no idea, but what it meant for this project in particular is that I had one day to make this happen. There are so many deadlines coming up right now and so many other ones that are gonna creep up real quick if I don't stay up on top of my shit. So I gave myself one day to make this happen, and that's all I could possibly spare. Problem number two. This was going to be my first time printing with water-based ink. I did do it once on my boxes and stuff, but this is going to be the first time printing any kind of clothing with it. And while I did know the basics of what it takes to print with water-based ink and screens to use and certain things like that, the very minimum, I did not know all the little caveats and stuff that it takes to really make that stuff work. Definitely, at least to me, my experience so far with it is that it takes a lot more technique and a lot more precision to get what you want out of that stuff, and yeah, I just didn't see that coming. So while we're on the topic of the water-based ink, let's move to problem number 3. They say shit slides downhill. Well, this is where I should have known I was in for a serious mudslide. I started off in the morning trying to mix the Pantone colors for this thing, and we needed 3 custom Pantone colors, dead on exact match to what I needed to print. There was no leeway, a few shades this way, a few shades that way. I wanted it to be like perfect, dead on. And well, the formulas for those 3 colors, which I can probably see happening because they don't seem to probably be very popular colors, the formulas for them were way off. And I don't mean by a little bit, I mean by a lot, like not even in the ballpark. So yeah, my first batch went to shit. So I tried mixing them again, thinking it was user error or just something, thinking it's something on my part. So mixed them again, exact same results. And after that, it was like, all right, I need to just wing this because I don't have time to get an update on the thing. So I just started dumping pigment in left, right, and center, trying to get these colors to work. I will 100% admit I am not an expert ink mixologist whatsoever. I know how to follow the directions, I know the very basics of color mixing and stuff, but when it comes to this stuff with adding pigments instead of just, whole globs of ink like we would with plastisol, the pigments are very concentrated and you gotta add in certain amounts, and a little bit too much will go a way opposite direction than you want to go. So I ended up mixing these things for hours and hours and hours and hours. Eventually I did get them exactly right and exactly what I wanted to do, but I burnt probably 3 hours on this thing already in the morning, so that set me back huge right off the bat. And not only did it set me back, but it put me in probably the worst possible mood I could ever start this job off in, and I made a big old mess all around the shop doing this thing, which is something that also puts me in a bad mood. So those two things combined were not very good to start this thing off with. I will say though, it is very awesome that within the Green Galaxy Mixing Systems, a little online based mixing software thing, that you can request an updated formula right there within the software without ever leaving it. And someone got back to me within 12, 13 hours or something like that, and now we're working together to update these colors and get them the exact way that they need to be. So thumbs up to that. So at this point, it was already like noon, which was not looking good already. And to put on top of that, I had to take a couple phone calls from people who are very important potential clients that needed my attention. There was no ignoring that, so I had to do that. That was about another hour into my day. So now we're sitting around 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And now is when we run into problem number 4. Now this is where things really started to go wrong. Now this was a 4-color camouflage design, and it wasn't like an easy camouflage like a square or rectangle, just a basic shape. It was a very intricate design that everything needed to be lined up 100% perfect on the money. And me being the cocky dickhead that I am sometimes, even though I'd never printed with water-based or done a lot of the things that this job required, I was like, you know what, let's go ahead and just make that a butt registration because I'm that good now. So there was no overlap with these colors whatsoever. There was no room for error. There was no room for leeway. They had to be 100% down to the 100th of a millimeter perfect, or it was not going to work. And that right there, that was my greatest downfall. I did not realize how much different water-based printing reacted on press and the different types of setups and things that you had to do, the different off contacts you had to use, different pressures, different angles, different, all the other little factors that come into screen printing that people don't really think about. A lot of things that I didn't think about with this one, a lot of things I didn't think about even when I started screen printing. They play a huge part in this thing. And with Plastisol, because I've been working with it for so long now, I do have all that stuff dialed with it. I have no problems in that department there whatsoever anymore. But with the water-based, with this being my first time, I realized a lot of those techniques and certain things that I've learned along the way, it's totally different for water-based. That stuff's pretty damn sensitive. Holy shit, doing a little too much angle, doing a little too much pressure, just changed everything so much. It was crazy. And so yeah, because of that, I was just having registration issues like crazy. And it wasn't like press registration issues or anything like that. It was me registration issues. One minute it would seem like I had it and it was registered and I was excited, and then 10 minutes later it would come out and then all of a sudden this color was lined up, and then come back to it a second time and then it wasn't lined up anymore. And it was a non-stop battle. And at first I'm inspecting all these different things, like is it the press, is it the screens I'm using, is it the squeegee, is it this? I'm like factoring in every single physical property around me that I possibly could, and in the end I figured out I was the problem. Because I put myself in such a tight tolerance situation, I can't even say tight tolerance, so I put myself in a zero tolerance situation. Because of that, there was any little bit input that came from me or setup wise that was a little bit different, was changing the whole entire setup in a way that I just did not understand. Now that I'm not in the moment, it's very easy to figure out what I did wrong, but in the moment, I'm a very nice, easygoing guy most of the time, and that's the way I come off on camera most of the time, I think. But there is another side when I get like really angry that you don't want to see. At one point, dude, there was literally screens filled with ink taking flights across the shop and other shit just getting tossed and smashed, and it was just like, it was so bad. And because of all these mistakes that I made, and because of the mistakes I made during my freak out that I had to deal with afterwards, at this point it was already the end of the day. It was already like 8 o'clock at night, and it was just, I had to call it. And that right there was probably what pissed me off the most, and actually like put me into a state that I don't even know the emotion for it. I was mad, but I was very disappointed in myself at the same time, and there was just a whole bunch of things going on inside my head. Because I don't like to quit, man. I don't like to quit. I don't like to fail. I don't like to lose. I don't like anybody. Well, nobody likes any of that stuff, but there are certain people that have a competitive nature, me especially. Like, I've got an extremely competitive nature. That stuff gets to us so much worse. Like, it'll eat us alive inside for weeks, even months at a time. Dude, there's stuff from my riding career from like 10, 12 years ago that I still can't sleep at night sometimes if it pops into my head. So after spending literally a whole day working on something and having absolutely nothing to show for it, having to cut that final piece of gear that's supposed to be coming out with this new 38 release, and not even getting enough footage to make a video because I was so pissed off, I kept turning the camera off, it kept getting in my way, and at one point it pissed me off so bad, I full-blown drop-kicked the tripod and sent the camera flying across the shop. Thankfully I didn't break anything, but all of that adding up, that did not sit well with me for a few days. That was 3 failures in one day. So whatever, I got back to work, I banged out a few jobs that went fine, and then I had one coming up that required water-based a couple days later, and I was just dreading this thing. Super dreading this thing. After what happened a few days prior, I was just like, dude, if this happens again, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But all of a sudden, things changed a lot. Because I went through everything that I did a few days prior, all of a sudden I paid a lot more attention to detail. I was a lot more precise. I was a lot more methodical about everything I did, and this job went off without a hitch. Everything came out absolutely perfect. It was amazing. It was actually one of the nicest things that I've ever made. And yeah, that made me realize something. That this whole project wasn't a failure. It was just a learning experience. Now, it might not have registered in my head at the time because, well, it fucking sucked. But all of a sudden, a few days later with the next job, even without doing any further research on the topic whatsoever, I knew what to do. And then that brought me back to my riding stuff again. Like, yes, at one point with my riding career, with racing and with freestyle, I was a contender to win at all times. I won a lot of the time, and I was very accustomed to it, but I didn't start off that way. In the beginning, shit, I was last place all the time, and then built myself to like a mid-pack guy, and then a top 10 guy, and then hundreds of like third and second place finishes ever before I got a victory. I guess what I'm trying to say is that in order to win, in order to be successful at something, in order to be that person on top, is that along the way to get there, you have to fail, and you have to fail a lot. Some of those moments you might feel like you've failed or you're a failure, but you're not a failure. It's just that you're learning slowly to become a winner. It's going to take some time and some practice to get there, and sometimes I forget that. So it took a little bit of time, but after that little revelation finally happened in my head, I immediately felt way better about the situation. And yes, it sucks that I'm not going to have that piece for this little launch, but I know after I put a little bit more time and work in, I'm going to go back to that thing, I'm going to knock it out, and it's going to be 10 times better than it would have if I would have gotten it the first time. So I mean, in the end, it's not that huge of a loss. Plus, it's not like that's the only opportunity that I had to make those things. I happen to know a guy that owns a print shop, so I'll probably be able to squeeze those in somewhere. But by the time you're watching this, all the other stuff that we did successfully make last week is now live, ready to go on the site right now. Plus, I restocked a bunch of the stickers and hats and other things like that. So if you'd like to support the brand, support the channel, support me, or just straight up want some dope shit, click the link to the website down below, and it would be much appreciated. And every time that stuff disappears off the shelf, it just means that we can do more cool stuff on this channel, more cool print projects, more bike stuff, hopefully soon would be awesome, and things like that. So yeah. But anyways, I apologize for kind of shitting the bed on the video this week, but sometimes that stuff happens. We'll be back to our regular flow again in the next one. I'm working on a couple more how-to videos right now, so got a few more things in the pipe. Thank you guys for sticking around. Make sure you like, subscribe, click all that stuff down below. We'll see you again in the next one.